Okay, so this is the second, part 2 of Reimagining and Effective Community Engagement. So what we talked about in the first class, I want to just super fast tell you, flip your slide please. We talked about 3 key ideas from part 1. We talked about the fact that poverty is not just material, it's about broken relationships and how we can all relate to that in some way. We talked about specific different types of broken relationships. The link for the first presentation is available on this QR code, so you can always go and look at that as well, and the recording will be there. But the point number 2, we talked about paternalism. So doing with rather than doing for can promote dignity. And then the third point that we talked about, amplifying strength can have greater impact than addressing needs. So that's where we talked about really asking questions, learning about the community in which you're engaging, and figuring out, well, what are the strengths that exist there so that we can amplify, walk alongside, and that's the whole point there. So flip the slide again, please. So what we're talking about in this particular class, we're talking about how do we prepare ourselves to see our shared humanity in others so that we can partner with God. God is already working in our community. We need to partner with God. But in order to partner with God to do all of those concepts that I just talked about in part 1 class, we really need to see our shared humanity. We need to connect. And so that's what this class is going to be talking about. So in order to connect, we need to talk about culture. We need to talk about cultural humility, cultural sensitivity, maybe cultural awareness, emotional intelligence, emotional, maturity. We need to talk about all those things. So it's really important to enter this space with patience, right? So we're going to talk about a lot of concepts really quickly. I apologize for the fire hose with information, but have patience, mostly with yourselves. As we go through this material, I would really encourage you to jot down some notes. Like where do you sit and you're like, I got questions about that. I don't know how I feel about that. You really, really need to take time to have some self-reflection after all of this information. So just thinking about what is culture, flip your slide, please. So we're on slide 4 now. So what is culture? So culture really is a set of learned behaviors. It's something that we share with people around us in the group. It's either spoken or unspoken. And this really means that it is an interplay of a lot of different elements. It could be behaviors, it could be customs, beliefs, values. And we know that our culture can very, very subtly influence our perceptions and interactions that we have every single day. So when we think about culture, we have to think simplistically, but we know like characteristics and behaviors. Flip your slide, please. But we also know that under the surface, there's a ton going on, right? So think about, go to your next slide, that iceberg. That's such a great picture. A lot of people use it to describe culture. So we've got the above the surface things, the obvious things. We've got the underneath the surface that are the more complicated things. It definitely takes time. It definitely takes time and patience to understand and to go deeper in somebody else's culture. So when we're talking about those above the water things, flip your slide, please. When we're talking about those above the water things, those are, again, what we see, what we experience just kind of on the daily, right? Those physical characteristics, the attributes, it's food, it's music, and things of that nature. In general, most of us are super, super comfortable at this level, right? But and most of us do what our parents did. Maybe we venture out a little bit, we try different food, maybe we learn another language. That's expanding our cultural awareness and our sensitivities. But that's kind of where we stay a lot of times. And so when we go below the surface, flip your slide, please, that's really where the deep culture comes into play. This is exactly where we can have those unconscious, subtle biases that they start to kind of interact with all of our perceptions and all of our things, right? So it's at this level that it becomes much, much easier to have conflict if we don't have an attitude of humility, learning, and acceptance. And I'm going to say like that posture of learner, Flip your slide, please.
So yeah, we would love to hear from you guys. What is some culture or family traditions that you guys have? Is there a particular way that you guys celebrate holidays? I know for me and my family, my dad, he's a cook of the house, and he always made mac and cheese, and no one else is supposed to make it but him because he was like, it was just a thing in our household. But like, what are some characteristics that's maybe not be as obvious that's in your family that people can't see right away? Or what is just something that you guys do in your family that's kind of, you guys have kind of carried along the way? It could be something simple, it could be something like really deep, just anything.
I could share something similar to what you were saying. So my mom, we had this green bean casserole. My mom always was the one to make it. But I think also another like little tradition that we do is like PJs. We always Christmas, we're gonna do PJs together, and we're gonna take pictures and stuff like that. So those are like two small, simple ones that we continuously do.
I like that.
So my family for birthdays, instead of the traditional way of, like the person whose birthday it is gets gifts and things like that, the person whose birthday it is gives gifts to, people that they're close to them and explains, why, why it is important that they're in their life. So it's a little different, but it's something that's very important to my family.
That's awesome. I've never heard that before. Anyone else?
I don't know. Just growing up with Chinese parents and grandparents, and we get together, as some harvest time period, and one of the things they always bring out is a moon cake. It's like, I don't know what it's all about. There's some good sentiment or significance, for that traditional culture.
Mooncake. So do you still do that?
No, I don't. But I like eating it.
You eat it, just maybe not at that time. Anytime, mooncake.
No, that's really cool. I think we all like grow up doing different things, but we kind of relate in a way, but we don't always see that right away when we look at each other.
Yeah, so change slides, please. I love this quote. Every time we ask questions like this, we help to disarm our personal biases. And by making it a practice of self-reflection and being open-minded, having that open-minded listening and posture of humility, like what I talked about before, we are really putting ourselves in that position where we can serve all people effectively. And it doesn't matter what the cultural background is. So again, class part 1, how do we serve? How do we engage in our community? What are some key concepts and best practices? But now, zooming out a little bit more, the way you do that is to really be cognizant of other cultures. It's like one builds on the other, right? All right, flip your slide, please. So when we're talking about this, why is this important in the volunteer sphere? Why in the world would it be important to consider culture? So you've got some points there. Unique strengths and perspectives benefit the larger community. So obviously more people working together, it's just more sustainable, right? We just get more work done, it's more sustainable, and we want to have larger numbers like that. We want to have everybody's input. People from different cultures have to be involved. What if we go into a community and yes, there's some different things going on? Think about the impact and the sustainability if we actually include community members in our planning and in our execution of that community engagement. So it's all about like, how do we amplify the strengths, but also what are the cultural strengths? What are the cultural pieces that we need to be aware of? And appreciating that diversity, that goes hand in hand with that respectful, dignity honoring engagement that we were talking about in part 1. So when we look at that wide range of ideas, customs, there's so much wisdom, there's so much depth available. We just have to choose to plug into that. So that's the biggest thing there. And we also know that if we don't learn about the influences that have shaped and have kind of like made the history of that community, if we don't learn about those things, we might just be repeating mistakes. So let's say you go into a community and other volunteers have been in there. Oh, they're here again. They've got the t-shirts on. They're here again, right? Well, they come and go. Why does it work for some groups and it doesn't work for some others? Getting to know the community, asking the questions, and going deeper what is the history? What are maybe the racial things, the racial tensions? Like, we need to know these things, and that's all part of cultural awareness and certainly cultural competence. So that's what we're going to get at next here. So when we realize, flip the slides please, when we realize that there's so much going on, like, we know culture is a complex topic, that is a given, right? And the question then becomes, how do we handle that? So it's that shared humanity piece, right? And so literally seeing others the way that God sees them. And what we know from that first class we talked about with the Deuteronomy scriptures, God wanted the Israelites to remember their captivity. They wanted, there were needs that were gone unmet in their community, and there were people that had material needs. Well, God wanted them to remember their sameness, so that they would like wake up and help and do something, right? So when we see our shared humanity in others, it's easy to connect, and the cultural piece just becomes this beautiful layer that is like cherry on top of the relationships. So that's what it is. It's complicated, but we need to have that learning posture. All right, flip slides, please.
So again, we would love to hear from you. Has there been a time where you have been in a community that had a different culture than your own? And for me, that was college. I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, elementary, middle, high school, all black. I had a few white teachers. We had one white student in our graduating class. And then I went to a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution for college. And it was a real culture shock for me. I thought I would be able to handle that like new environment. And in a way I did, but it was just like certain things were new to me, certain like activities they were doing. Like, I didn't do a lot of hiking, I didn't do a lot of like kayaking or whatever. It was just not something I grew up doing. So I had to like relearn what they counted as fun and what they decided to do, and how they had to show up in a place where even they weren't around a lot of black people, and just how conversations were meant to be had and anything like that. So it was just very new to me, but I'm grateful for the experience. I feel like it helped me kind of like see the world differently. So I just love to hear from you guys. Was there a time where you had to show up into a different culture that maybe it was just really new to you?
Funny enough for me, one of the biggest culture shocks for me was running into from a white culture into a slightly different kind of white culture, which you would think would not be a big deal, but was kind of amazing coming from Church of Christ, but specifically ICOC culture, which I had been raised in my entire life in South Carolina, and then going into the heart of the mainline church in Nashville, Tennessee, going to a mainline church school, and realizing that, you know, people thought about their relationship to God and their relationship to their church communities totally differently. And I beclowned myself pretty severely in the first couple of years. It was a growth experience.
Yeah.
I think for me, well, I grew up, well, I'm Chinese, but I grew up in Oregon, from Oregon. I've hardly seen any Latino or Hispanics up there where I was growing up. But when I graduated from college, I got a job over in California, 1989. So I flew to California because I was like, never been outside of Oregon, and coming to Southern California and be like, whoa, it's a melting pot of people, like Hispanics, and it's all mixed. I've never been exposed to much of that culture, the Hispanics, and the food. I don't know if tri-tip is Hispanic or not. I don't know if it's very nice or whatever you think. So we get all the tamales, but also the language and so that was kind of new to me. It's like, whoa, but in a sense, there's a lot of Spanish-speaking people here in the United States.
Did you feel more or less comfortable that you saw? Did you feel more or less comfortable when you got here?
It was in California.
Yeah.
It was a new experience to me, so it was kind of like adjusting to a new environment and to kind of be aware of the people as well. So it's kind of like, oh wow.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, there's so many different times where I feel like in my life I felt this. But I think I'll go with when I'm from Kansas, and the church, the ministry there was so different from when I moved to Minnesota. I came from a ministry that was just like everybody just did sports all the time. It was just very sports oriented and things like that. It was just so different. And I came to Minnesota, and it was like Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. Everything, like, it was just, people were just a lot different. And I think like me being in a new place, and also everybody's so close.
Yeah.
So I feel like in the beginning it was very uncomfortable, but it helped me to like grow a ton, and like the way I love people, the things I do, how welcoming, I don't know, it's just a completely different culture, but I feel like it really has shaped me in an amazing way. So
Yeah.
I had just an experience. It's like kind of an opposite experience of you guys. So both my parents are immigrants, and so I grew up in a household that we didn't eat American food. You know, it was like we just whatever. You know, I would go to my friend's house to have Captain Crunch, right? And because that wasn't a thing in my house, but I grew up in an environment that was so accepting. Like my parents were immigrants, and it was so accepting of other foods and language and people and customs and things, and I loved that. And as I got older and I realized the tensions that exist, and as an adult, you know, you see things differently, you process things differently, and especially as a disciple, I've really had some moments of struggle when I hear things, the culture of the church, right? The culture of one family group versus another family group. And when it isn't like accepting, I struggle. And so for me, it's like a negative experience because I'm just like, what's wrong with you? Like, what Bible are you reading? You know, and so that kind of stuff. And so that different culture it's taken a lot of prayer, like really, you know, to get through that and to, but to keep my conviction. So yeah, a different take on it.
Yeah. We'll go on.
All right, well, let's move on. Okay, so the next slide is a video that, again, I'm sorry, it is not going to play in this PDF, but I will play it on my computer. No, what was I going to do? I'm going to play it on the Bluetooth so you guys can hear it. The link is there, though, so you can go back and look at it. So it's Brene Brown, and it's her empathy video. Clearly, you're not going to be able to hear or to see it, but
Oh, did you want to turn around?
I'm going to.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
And to have connection, we need empathy. That was the end. So with that said, empathy increases understanding. It improves communication. In the workplace, it increases teamwork. It increases everything, right? It increases self-awareness. We must be self-aware. We must have the posture of student, of learner, if we are ever going to be culturally competent and have humility, right? So it starts with empathy. And again, big picture, what are we even talking about? Finding that shared humanity space, right? And so when we find our shared humanity with every single set of eyes that we connect with, that's when we are truly tapping into, God, use me as your vessel. Like, use me, right? So we're here for a reason. We're at this conference for a reason. We do things in our communities for a reason. But are we fully tapping into what God could be doing with us? And based on information, books, people, experts, not me, we can't do that if we don't start from a place of empathy. It's impossible. You don't connect, right? So it's that emotional connection. And so when we're talking about cultural competence versus cultural humility, flip your slide, please. So competence, are we ever going to be like the thing? Are we ever going to have it figured out? Like, I don't know. But we can definitely grow. And just as the scriptures call us to grow spiritually, like we're not supposed to be on spiritual milk forever, right? God wants us to grow in our competence, in our empathy, in our emotional intelligence. All of that stuff is connected. And the good news is, not like your regular IQ, emotional intelligence is something we can all continue to grow in. And I believe that as disciples, we're super expected to do that, because you can't be a mature disciple and you can't be that vehicle, that vessel for God. You cannot be it to your full extent and to your best ability unless you grow in that piece. The humility, the awareness, but the emotional intelligence and the empathy is like, that's the starting point for all of that stuff. So competence is the ability to interact effectively with people of various racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, religious groups. Okay, great. Can you do it? A lot of us can do it, but how well do we do it? It takes cultural humility and all of those other things to be able to do it. Cultural competence is like this thing, this fixed thing. I got it, I'm there, I'm good. Humility is an ongoing process. It's like that spiritual journey. It's an ongoing process. So it's self-exploration, it's self-critique, it's self-reflection. And if we don't take the time to do that, again, how are we positioning ourselves for God to use us? Like, it takes all of these things and all of that self-reflection and growth and continually trying to better ourselves. Like, what's the best version of me? The best version of me is not what I am right now. It's hopefully it's going to get better, but we have to be intentional about it, right? So it's entering into a relationship, into a place with another person with the intention of hearing them and honoring their beliefs and customs, not that I'm going to come share mine. So cultural humility is, I'm going to walk into your space. I'm getting out of my space. I'm literally walking into your space. Teach me. Show me. Can I participate with you? So what if we entered our communities in that way also? Teach me. Show me. can I participate with you? Not that I'm the expert, I'm the savior coming in, and oh hey, do you want to come up here with me? Let me give you a hand. We don't want to give a hand. That implies that we have this big power thing. I hate empowerment. I hate that word in the service volunteer sphere because it implies I have something, I have this, you don't. Let me give you a hand, right? It's demeaning. It's not dignity honoring. It's not respectful. But what if I said, man, let me jump down in that hole with you. Let me help you. Let's lock arms together. Don't the scriptures tell us share each other's burdens, right? Lock arms with that person, help them up, use our resources to walk alongside. So that's part of class 1. We're not going to do for, we're going to do with. And all of this starts with relationships, which are impossible without empathy and without that self-awareness and the self-reflection and the growth. I love the scripture. So 1 Corinthians 9:22-23. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all people. Do we really have that intention? Because that's an intentionality thing. It doesn't come naturally. I mean, we're humans. We're selfish with our time sometimes. We're tired, we're cranky, we're whatever. We're humans, we're imperfect. But what a cool thing that when we start seeing our shared humanity with others, we can faithfully partner with God who is already in that community, already working. He's just waiting for us. God is waiting for us to get to the right headspace. How do you see people? How do we see people? God is waiting for us to have that moment of, I see it. I see my shared humanity. Now I can partner with God who's already there, and we can get this thing done. So that's what we're trying to share here with this class. Flip your slide, please. It's dangerous to assume that we can completely understand the lived experience of our neighbor. We can't walk in their shoes literally, right? When we do, we create spaces primed with opportunity for misunderstanding, exploitation, marginalization, and structural oppression. So just think big picture for a moment. We can all think of a community, a place, a situation where you're like, man, the playing field is not even here. It's a food desert, it's a whatever. How did it get there? Do we know the history? Do we know the cultural history of that neighborhood? Every single neighborhood has that side of the tracks. Every neighborhood has it, right? How did that happen? Like we've got an area in Minneapolis, there's this specific area that, there's history. Like the way that the city was zoned, the way that, people were put out of their homes and other stuff was built there and infrastructure. This was done. It wasn't an accident. It's not an accident that that's the projects now. It's not an accident. Okay, so it was designed. Well, if we don't go into that neighborhood knowing that, I am not going to be trusted at all, right? So I need to have that cultural humility to learn and to grow. And in that way, I'm positioning myself that I can engage in that community with better practices, with better ways to do it, right? And all of this is, okay, this isn't like Hope Worldwide put this training together. We're looking at scriptures, and we're looking at how do we bring these scriptures to life, and how do we live them out, and how do we have God's eyes. And so with all of that, just think about this for a moment. This class is really meant to have some self-reflection moments, not that you have to share it with others, but as I'm talking about these things, as I'm talking about maybe biases that you're unaware of that you have. Flip the slide, please. We know from research that our brains enjoy patterns and putting things together, grouping things together. That's how our brain is wired for some reason, right? But the problem is sometimes we do it to an extent that we're not even aware of these biases, these deep biases that we have. We don't even know we have them. It's kind of like you've got a pair of glasses on that is distorting your vision, you don't even realize, oh man, I just need to take the glasses off and I see things so much differently, right? We've lived with our own biases all of our lives, you know? And so I think that we need to explore those things. So looking at this slide, you know, earlier Nikayla asked a question about your personal cultural identity. So asking ourselves questions like this, it helps us become more aware of our own possible patterns and groupings. So on this slide, we've got some questions, and I really want to take a couple minutes. We have a few minutes. Take some time and look at these questions. Not that you need to share it with everybody else, but take note. How do I describe my own ethnicity, race, religion, gender, sexual orientation? What are my most closely held values? What would I want others to know about me? And not, again, maybe one of those speaks to you a little bit more and it kind of calls at you, right? And then let's look at the cultural assumptions. So sometimes we have these things, and again, those are those biases, those cultural assumptions that we don't even realize that we're holding on to. So what stands out at you in each of these following statements? She's a middle-aged woman. She probably has a husband and kids. The person using the wheelchair must have trouble making friends. She looks Latina, so she must speak Spanish. He's not making eye contact, so he must not want to talk to anybody. Okay, so again, big picture, zoom out. How would culture possibly influence any of those statements? So just take a few moments, and what are you gravitating to right now? Like, where's God making you hone in? Take a few minutes and look at those, please. You to revisit slide 17 here specifically, the whole thing, but slide 17, because looking at the first column and the second column, so what my eyes go automatically to is what would I want others to know about me? So if you didn't know me at all, you don't know anything about my family, my upbringing, nothing, what would I want you to know about me? And then if you heard like two little things, I told you my parents were immigrants. You might already have made some cultural assumptions. I didn't tell you where they're from. I didn't tell you why they came to America. I didn't tell you why they left their countries. You might already be making some assumptions. So that's just one little tiny example. You know what I mean? It's so easy. Like we do it like so automatically. If A, then B. Like we do this, like this whole thing about, like I said, the science that we know, that our brains, we just naturally group things together, and if this, then that, like the correlation piece, right? Because it gives us closure. You know what I mean? Like we're kind of like, I just need closure people sometimes. I just need to know how it works and why. Let's just, I don't like open-ended, you know, like we want to have a reason for everything. Like, well, why did that happen, right? And this is how these biases can really be fostered and grow. And so now we're talking like a negative thing, right? Because they're not always positive. Sometimes they're great things. I don't know what you're thinking about me. Maybe it's all good. But the point is, you don't know me. You don't know my story. And so again, I could do the same thing. Just hearing little snippets of your stories, and I could create this whole piece, this whole narrative. But my narrative is not your reality, right? So again, zoom out. Let's talk about our shared humanity. We cannot faithfully partner with God in our community, in the work that He's already doing, unless we connect emotionally with other human beings. You can't connect emotionally if you lack empathy. You can't connect emotionally if you lack cultural humility. That's the growing piece one, right? There's competence and there's humility. We need both, but we need to continually grow in the humility piece. So if you flip one more slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask, Does anybody else have anything that they want to share about that other slide? Maybe one of those questions that isn't, like super personal, but did anything pop out at you? Like, man, that kind of hit me? Yes.
There's two things from each side. One thing I feel like I gravitate to on the question side was, what would I want others to know about me? I don't know. That's stuck out to me. But I think another thing, this is the thing I feel like I think often with people, not just people in wheelchairs, but that person using the wheelchair must have trouble making friends. I feel like I see people and I just get very, I don't know, sad. I don't even know who this person is, but I just feel like, I hope they're not alone. Things like that. And I feel like that's a good thing. But I don't know. I think it's like more of like what I do with that. I don't know. Because I feel like I always have those types of thoughts where I just feel sad for people. But I don't know anything about them. Yeah.
But so I hear you, and like maybe, because I totally get what you're saying, and you're an empath. Like you feel for people. You have empathy. That you're demonstrating it right now in your statement. But the point is, sometimes we're feeling for them, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you're called to maybe make eye contact and smile, not avoid, and so that's a great thing. Maybe they're not lonely, you're right, but who doesn't need a smile? That's like human connection in that space. Everybody benefits from that. Like you literally get an oxytocin boost when you smile at somebody. Do you know that? It's crazy. So like just being us, being disciples, being loving, being whatever. Who knew? It's also good for your oxytocin levels. Little side note from the training. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think at the end of the day, what we want others to know about us, I think that's one of the most key pieces, right? Because if somebody is not going to take the time to get to know us, well, what are they really walking away with? What kind of misconceptions might they have? So again, zoom out, community engagement. We could have all kinds of misconceptions and miss the boat on so many massive potential relationships and engagement, community organizations that we partner with or we don't partner with. Like we could be missing out. What we do when we go home. I don't know if you all have a chapter where you're at. If you don't, please come talk to us at the Hope Table. But your church, your chapter, you don't need to wait for your chapter to do something. How about us specifically? Like, how does God call you to engage with people and in your community? It doesn't have to be this big monster thing. It's something as simple as smiling at somebody, right? Recognizing your shared humanity. Isn't that what God wants us to be doing to everybody, with everybody? Like, what better way is there to share our faith than to be loving with people? It doesn't mean you have a sit-down conversation with everybody on the street, but, like you pass by the same person that's experiencing food insecurity or housing insecurity, you're on your way to work. Is it that hard to just, let's say we're walking, I don't know, I was on an HBC in Winnipeg and we were walking to our bus stop, and every day that we did this thing for almost 2 weeks, almost every single day, this one man was always sitting at this one intersection. And the second day that I saw him, I was like, there's a pattern. He's here every day. I'm not telling you this to be like, oh, Ingrid's so cool. I'm just saying one little thing, but I pray about this stuff. I'm intentional. Like, God, give me your eyes, right? And the third day, I had something. I grabbed some food from the kitchen and I had something, but I just kind of, you meet people where they're at, right? And he was sitting, so I kind of crouched down. I'm like, my name's Ingrid. Can I ask your name? And I had something for him. He saw that I had something. I go, man, I don't have very much. I just have these apples or whatever it happened to be that day. Would you like these? And he's like, oh yeah. And he goes, yeah, I'm going to share them with my friend. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. How easy was that, right? So then the other days that I saw him, I just kind of made it a point to have something. And then, you know, I gave him something else, and he goes, oh, I'm going to give some to my friend over there. I'm like, I have some for him too. And he like, you know, but again, it's the shared humanity. Big deal. How much time does it take, right? And again, I'm not telling you this because, oh, check me out. I'm just saying, if we're intentional, one little thing, I did not make or break his day, but in that moment of human interaction, in that moment of, I see you, I don't think I'm better than you. Let me show you how I don't think I'm better than you, you know? That's where we're connecting with people. And again, God's already there. God's already working. He took whatever I gave him, and he immediately wanted to share it with his friend. I mean, how cool is that, right? What if we had that same attitude all the time? Man, how different things would be, you know? So yeah, the very last slide here. Each of us has a story. I think we'd all agree with that, right? But are we willing to truly enter into another relationship with the firm belief that each person has something contribute to my life and to my story? Other people contribute to us, right? It doesn't matter if they're poor, rich, Japanese, Lebanese, from this country or from the city, or from the city. Are you willing to enter each encounter with a posture of humility, desiring to learn, believing that the very heartbeat of God already exists within each person? Are we seeing our shared humanity so that we can partner effectively with God in our communities? I can't believe that we made the time. Do you have any questions? Anything else? You know, the classes are over. Please come talk to us at the Hope Table. I would love to continue. There's so much depth to all of these slides. There's so much more information. This is really to start conversations. This is not, oh, we figured it out. But this is, give me some direction, give me some concepts. Check out the very first link when you QR code this. The very first link is the first class presentation slides. And there's a handout and all kinds of other resources. So please get all of that. But continue the conversation. If it's somebody that's at the conference with you, if it's when you go home to your churches, to your family groups, continue this conversation. How can we spur each other on? This is all biblical, you guys. How do we spur each other on? How do we lock arms with one another and grow spiritually, emotionally, with empathy, and in humility? That's what this is all about. Thank you so much for allowing us to share this time with you. Both myself and Nikayla, we work full-time for Hope, and this is like a very abridged version of a training that we do, that we go around the country to other chapters and churches. So yeah, come see us at the Hope Table, please, if you want to talk further or get some cool merch. Thanks for
guys.
representing with your Hope shirts, by the way.